On live television, a 65-year-old coach, already a legend, punched an opposing player in the throat during a game. This single moment destroyed his 28-year legacy and shocked millions. Unfortunately, the man who threw that punch had been building toward that moment for decades. Woody Hayes is one of the most iconic and controversial figures in the history of college football. A man of iron will and fierce conviction, Hayes was not just a coach, but a symbol of old school grit, Midwestern values, and a stubborn refusal to yield. His story is not just about victories and championships, but also about the human costs of obsession and pride. Wayne Woodrow Hayes was born on February 14, 1913 in Clifton, Ohio, a small town near Dayton. He was the son of Wayne B. Hayes, a school superintendent, and Effie Hayes, a homemaker. His early years were shaped by small-town discipline and the ethos of hard work, and he grew up in the crucible of World War I and the Great Depression. Hayes attended Newcomerstown High School, where he played center and tackle. He went on to Denison University, a small liberal arts school in Granville, Ohio. There, Hayes played tackle under Coach Tom Rogers and graduated in 1935. Although not a standout player, he soaked up every bit of football knowledge he could, displaying early on the intellectual curiosity and obsessive dedication that would define his coaching style. After college, Hayes returned to Newcomerstown as a high school coach, then enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II. He attained the rank of lieutenant commander and commanded the destroyer escort USS Reinhardt in the Pacific Theater. Military life left a lasting mark. Hayes returned from the war more disciplined and mission-focused than ever before. From the book Woody Hayes, A Reflection by Paul Hornung, published in 1991. All branches of the military shared a niche in Woody Hayes' esteem, but the Navy remained his favorite. It was the Navy in which he had served in World War II, and it was during this Navy service that he developed and honed the leadership skills that, with intelligent application, came to full flower as a college football coach. When he confronted a disciplinary situation with a football player, Hayes said, "I started the interview with an old Navy expression. Don't blow smoke. The only possible way to start such a meeting is with the truth." Once the young man reached the point of recognizing his mistake and appreciating how it adversely affected others, Woody noted, "I usually use the same technique I used at the captain's mast in the Navy. I let the player set his own penalty, and then I cut it in half." Hayes began his college coaching career at Denison University in 1946, where he quickly built a winning program using a no-nonsense physical style of play. He then moved to Miami University of Ohio in 1949, succeeding Sid Gilman. In just 2 seasons, Hayes led the team to a 14-5 record and a Salad Bowl victory over Arizona State. In 1951, he was hired as head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. It was a controversial choice. Fans wanted Paul Brown, the legendary Cleveland Browns coach, to return to his alma mater. Hayes inherited an Ohio State program that had had only 12 wins against Michigan in 47 games. Hayes inherited a struggling Buckeye program, but quickly turned it around. His teams were built on what he called 3 yards and a cloud of dust, a conservative run-heavy offense that emphasized ball control and brute physicality. In just his 3rd year, Hayes led the Buckeyes to a national championship in 1954. That team, led by Howard Hopalong Cassidy, went undefeated and captured the hearts of Ohioans with their tenacity and precision. See our video about Cassidy for more on him. Over the next 2 decades, Hayes would lead Ohio State to 4 more national championships, 1957, 61, 68, and 70, and 13 Big Ten titles. His 1968 team, which destroyed Michigan 50-14, is often cited as one of the greatest college football teams of all time. That squad featured stars like quarterback Rex Kern, running back Jim Otis, and defensive back Jack Tatum. men who embodied Hayes' physical, unforgiving style of play. Hayes was a gifted recruiter who brought future NFL stars and college football Hall of Famers to Columbus. Archie Griffin, the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner, played under Hayes from 1972 to 1975. Hayes' program was not just a factory for NFL talent, it was also a boot camp for future coaches. His coaching tree includes Bo Schembechler, Lou Holtz, Earl Bruce, Glenn Mason, Ara Parseghian, and Bill Mallory, among others. No story about Woody Hayes is complete without talking about the 10-Year War. His rivalry with Michigan coach Bo Schembechler from 1969 to 1978. These two men, former mentor and protégé, transformed the Ohio State-Michigan game into a national spectacle. Each game carried massive stakes, a Big Ten title and a Rose Bowl berth. The series during this period finished with a slight edge to Michigan with a 5-4-1 record, but the drama was unmatched. Hayes so hated Michigan that he refused to say the word Michigan, instead referring to them as that team up north, a phrase that continues in the rivalry to this day. One of the most often repeated stories is that Woody once ran out of gas in Michigan and pushed his car across the state line rather than buy fuel in the state. While the story may be exaggerated, it reflects his deeply entrenched disdain for the state. Bo Schembechler, Woody's trusted assistant, had been at Ohio State from 1958 to 1962, then left to become head coach at Miami of Ohio, where he compiled a 40-17-3 record from 1963 to 1968. In 1969, Schembechler became head coach at Michigan, that team up north. Now remember, the year before, Ohio State had crushed Michigan. The Buckeyes entered the 1969 Michigan game undefeated, ranked number 1, riding a 22-game win streak. In their minds, the Rose Bowl is already booked. Michigan was supposed to be rebuilding under their rookie coach, and then Bo dropped 24 points on his mentor, winning 24-12. Talk about setting the stage for war. I'm not going to go through the entire decade of games. We'll do that in a later video. But here are the scores. Now notice how close most of these games are. The 1973 game ended in a 10-10 tie, one of the most controversial results in series history. Despite the tie, the Big Ten athletic directors voted Ohio State into the Rose Bowl, infuriating Michigan fans and especially Bo Schembechler. In Hayes' final game against Michigan, he lost 14-3. Ohio State hadn't scored a touchdown against Michigan in 3 years. On the sideline, he shoved a cameraman, threw his infamous cap, screamed at officials. 3 weeks later, he'd throw his final punch. Over the 10 games, Michigan went 5-4-1, but neither side ever dominated. The 10-Year War epitomized hard-nosed, high-stakes football and forged the modern legend of the game. Hayes viewed himself as a soldier fighting for the soul of America, with Ann Arbor as the enemy camp. Woody Hayes' legacy is filled with triumph, but it's equally shadowed by a series of incidents that revealed his darker impulses, episodes of his explosive temper that marred his public image long before the infamous punch that ended his career. A major incident occurred in 1959 following Ohio State's devastating 17-0 loss to Southern California in Los Angeles. After the game, 2 West Coast riders entered the Buckeyes' locker room before Hayes had finished addressing his injured and demoralized team. From the book, A Fire to Win, The Life and Times of Woody Hayes by John Lombardo, published in 2006. Hayes began addressing his players in the locker room. After the game, when he spotted 2 members of the press, Dick Schaefer, the brother of a reporter for the Pasadena News-Star, and Al Bine, who worked for the Los Angeles Examiner. Both were milling around the locker room, waiting to interview some of the players just after the game when Hayes went off. "Get out," Hayes screamed. But the 2 riders apparently didn't move fast enough for Hayes, who lunged after them and took a swing at Bine. Bine ducked, and Hayes apparently hit Schaefer in the back, knocking him up against a wall. Hayes then picked up Schaefer by the shoulders and shoved him against the wall near the exit door. A physical confrontation with two riders was a far different matter than Hayes bullying the bands, as he had done on his previous trips to California. For Hayes, it was simply an extension of what he routinely did to players on the practice field. After locking out the riders for nearly half an hour after the game, Hayes came out denying that he had struck either of the riders. He did, however, admit to pushing Schaefer out the door. The matter was taken up by Hayes' peers, and an ethics committee of the American Football Coaches Association decided to publicly admonish Hayes for his assault on the riders. If nothing else, it would at least send Hayes an embarrassing message from his peers. The Ohio State administration quietly admonished Hayes, but failed to take any action against him for the physical confrontation. Neither did the Big Ten Conference. And further on in the book, we get an example of Hayes in practice, a story from Tom Matt, quarterback from 1958 to 1960. "I fumbled on purpose in practice, and it drove him nuts," Matt said. "I started pulling my hands out from under center, and we had 6 fumbles. He ran over and screamed, 'What the F are you doing?' And Bo was giggling, and I was laughing. Woody said, 'This ain't funny,' and then he gave me a forearm shiver and knocked me ass over teacup. If it were today, I could have owned the school. He was so pissed off that he hit himself. Bo told me to get out of there before Woody woke up, so I took off and he came looking for me." On May the 4th, 1974, student protesters were killed by the National Guard at Kent State University. There were Vietnam War protests across campuses in the United States. And again, from the book A Fire to Win, The Life and Times of Woody Hayes, we have: "The shooting sparked even more violence on the Ohio State campus for the next few days. On May the 6th, and I'm paraphrasing, Fawcett, the university president, decided to close the campus. According to university documents, crowds of hundreds of protesters roared its approval and marched over to Ohio Stadium and rang the victory bell that usually sounded after a Buckeyes win." Now, Hayes gets involved with the protesters. "He threw himself into the middle of the campus demonstrations and rallies, urging calm restraint and for the students to back down from their protest demands. He also preached the same beliefs to his players, many of whom were caught between joining in with their fellow student protesters and following the rigid beliefs of their coach. Woody was out there on the oval with the protesters, and he'd grab a bullhorn and tell the students to express their beliefs, but not to be destructive," Kern said. "He believed in Nixon and he believed in the establishment, but he really wasn't afraid to talk to the students. He wanted to stay close to the action." The student protests were a paradox to Hayes. His belief in the Republic made it difficult to hear the shouts of the anti-establishment students. Yet he believed in the right to gather, and he felt that the violence used against the students was completely unjustified. This is more enigma than scandal, but I'm including it as a note on how Woody Hayes handled himself in a time of great conflict. The 1971 game saw another Hayes outburst. Again, I'll let an excerpt from the book A Fire to Win tell the story. After the Buckeyes were intercepted late in the fourth quarter to seal a 10-7 Michigan win, Hayes, furious at the officials for missing what he felt was an interference call in the play, stormed out to the middle of the field to confront the officials halting play. The animated attack on the referee resulted in a 15-yard penalty, but Hayes wasn't finished. After screaming at the other officials, Hayes was shown the sideline by some of his own players. Once deposited to the bench, Hayes sprinted down the sideline toward the officials, grabbing a yard marker and busting it over his knee and tossing the mangled equipment onto the field. Then he stormed over to a first down marker and shredded it to pieces. The Buckeyes may have been used to these antics, but to fans in the national television audience, it was shocking. No public disciplinary action was taken, but the incident was documented in Big Ten reports and became part of the growing chorus of concerns around Hayes' sideline behavior. Prior to the 1973 Rose Bowl, Hayes shoved a camera into the face of photographer Art Rogers. From the book I Remember Woody, Recollections of the Man They Called Coach Hayes by Steve Greenberg and Dave Raderman, published in 1997. Woody's huddle broke up and kapow! I was kneeling down, and when he walked by me, he just reached out, grabbed my camera, and rammed it back in my face. They thought maybe I had cracked an eyeball, but everything turned out fine. The next day, the Times sought battery charges against Hayes, as well as an apology from him. He had a record of 21 or 22 earlier incidents where he had hit people in the press. Those had all been kept quiet. The Times pursued it so no one else would get hit, but you saw what happened later. I was told eventually the editors got some kind of letter from the school, but I never saw it. All the charges were eventually dropped. Rogers also gives a pretty good description of Hayes. I covered Woody for a number of years. I found him to be a great public speaker, but when he went out on the football field, he became a man obsessed. He was two totally different people. Something that happened on the football field was totally different from what happened off the field. He would kick things and throw his glasses and not even remember it. He was a tyrant on the field, an absolute tyrant. But off the field, he was a pretty charming guy. In 1977, a late fumble at Michigan caused Hayes to swing at ABC cameraman Mike Friedman. According to the Memphis Press Scimitar on November 21, 1977, Friedman said Hayes swung a right-handed blow at his stomach. The cameraman said he blocked the punch with his elbow while he was operating a handheld camera near the Ohio State bench. "I'm not pressing charges," said the Los Angeles-based Friedman, "unless somebody can tell me how to get $8 million. All of these incidents built up over the years, but it was the December 29, 1978 Gator Bowl that brought Hayes' career to an abrupt end. Trailing Clemson late in the game, Ohio State quarterback Art Schlichter threw a pass that was intercepted by linebacker Charlie Bauman. As Bauman was tackled out of bounds near the Ohio State sideline, Hayes exploded and struck Bauman in the throat. The act was captured on live television and caused immediate national outrage. Hayes refused to apologize. In fact, when questioned about it afterward, he snapped, "I'm not going to apologize for anything." Ohio State had no choice but to act. Less than 24 hours later, Hayes was fired as head coach. After his firing, Hayes largely stayed out of the public spotlight. He gave speeches, often about patriotism, the military, and education. He also taught classes at Ohio State and mentored young people. Despite his fall from grace, Hayes remained beloved by many in the Buckeye community. When he died of a heart attack on March 12, 1987, at age 74, tributes poured in from across the country. Richard Nixon delivered his eulogy, part of which includes, "I was privileged to know the real Woody Hayes, the man behind the media myth. Instead of a know-nothing Neanderthal, I found a Renaissance man with a consuming interest in history and a profound understanding of the forces that move the world. Instead of a cold, ruthless tyrant on the football field, I found a warm-hearted softy, very appropriately born on Valentine's Day, who often spoke of his affection for his boys, as he called them, and for his family." Now, of course, the Bauman incident was replayed repeatedly in the media. In his book, Woody Hayes, A Reflection, Paul Hornung states, "The Hayes-Bauman episode was rerun on television, including national networks, and rehashed in the press. The incident confirmed in the minds of many, mainly outside of Ohio, an image of Woody Hayes that had been nurtured for some time by unfriendly segments of the media, that of an ill-tempered, tyrannical, self-centered dictator, out of control, a not-so-lovable curmudgeon. But it was a woefully false image because it did not account for the whole man. It ignored Woody Hayes as the molder of young men, the teacher, the scholar, the benefactor to his fellow man, the patriot and the winner, on the field and off." Hayes' overall record of 238 wins, 72 losses, and 10 ties, .761 winning percentage, ranked 9th all-time at the time of his retirement. With his Ohio State record of 205 wins, 61 losses, and 10 ties remaining unsurpassed by any Big Ten coach. His 5 national championships, 1954, 57, 61, 68, and 70, and 13 Big Ten titles established him among college football's greatest coaches. From 1972 to 1977, Hayes' teams won 6 consecutive Big Ten championships, going 49-8 during this remarkable run. Hayes was a paradox, an intellectual who read widely in philosophy and history, but who was also undone by his own temper. A disciplinarian who preached self-control, yet couldn't always follow his own advice. A mentor who changed lives, and a man who, in one moment of rage, lost everything. The Michigan-Ohio State rivalry remains one of the fiercest, most insane rivalries in all of sports. Where would it be without Woody Hayes? I'm going to end with a quote from Bo Schembechler, the man who was his fiercest rival and closest friend. From Bo, Life, Laughs, and Lessons of a College Football Legend by Bo Schembechler and Mitch Albom. I loved Woody Hayes. I am not ashamed to say it. In the 37 years I knew him, he coached me, humbled me, employed me, angered me, and taught me more about the game than anyone could. I guess I was about as close to him as anyone. But to the day he died, I never considered myself his equal. This is John Johnston with Hardcore College Football History. Thank you for watching.